Okay, we're holding over here in Tehillim Memhe 45. Anyone that wants to look inside, we're holding here in Psalm 45 Memhe. And we began speaking last week a little bit about the power of tefillah, of our prayers. A person will daven sincerely from the bottom of their heart, how Hashem is going to listen to them. We spoke about that the milas, that the great exaltation of a king is not his might, it's not his power, it's not his wealth, his riches, it's not his sword, it's not his army, but really the greatness of a melech, of a king, are the midas, are the character traits of that king. How he deals with the people, how he talks to the people, how he cares about the people, how he has compassion on them, how he thinks about them. And we spoke about this idea that that's really for ourselves as well. Everybody is a melech, everybody is a malka. Everybody is a king or a queen, as we pointed out. This is also a Tehillim that deals with marriage. It's the chassan of the marriage of a king and of a queen. And we mentioned that you can remain a melech, you can remain a malka, you can remain a king and a queen all of your life in marriage. Depends how you treat your spouse. If you come with good midot, you come with positive character traits, and you're warm and you're caring and you're giving and you're understanding and you're accepting and you're patient, so then your husband will always be the king in your eyes. And then, of course, assuming that you have good husbands, he will treat you in the same way as well. And you'll always receive reciprocal treatment, and you'll be a queen in his eyes as well. So that's what we're holding over here. We're moving now to the 8th verse in the Tehillim. And it says like this: Ahavta tzedek, you loved tzedek, righteousness. Vatisna resha, you hated, you despised wickedness and evil. Alkein, therefore, meshachecha elokim elokecha, shemen sasa mechaverecha. And therefore, since that you are a person who loves righteousness and you despise wickedness, therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, your God, has anointed you with shemen, with oil, sasa mechaverecha, and you have received happiness and good tidings from your friends as well. Says Rav Hirsch on this pasuk, he says, what has distinguished you from all of the others, meaning what makes you such a special king, what makes you stand above all the rest, is that you love tzedek, you love righteousness, and you hate evil. That's what the pasuk says. Which means the following. This is the way that Rav Hirsch goes on to explain in a much deeper way. Why does a person love tzedek? Why do they love righteousness? And why do they hate evil? There are two reasons. Either because you see that righteousness is a good thing and evil is a bad thing. That's very nice. And therefore a person will try to cleave to the ways of tzidkus, of righteousness, and they will try their best to stay away from the ways of wickedness because they realize it's not good for them. It is not good for them to be pulled after that which is wrong. However, there are other people whose desire for righteousness is such that the only thing that matters to me is that I should be a person that is pursuing tzidkus. And I don't allow myself to come in contact with the rishus, with that which is wicked and that which is bad, because I have no desire at all to be connected to something that is negative and not positive. There are people that look at the world and they say, well, righteousness is a nice thing, wickedness is a bad thing, I'm going to stay away from that, I'll cling to that. There are other people, as it says in the pasuk, Ahavta tzedek, they love the ways of righteousness, and therefore every ounce and every fiber of their body, of their being, wants to cleave to such a lifestyle. And since that the love that they have for righteousness is so great and is so magnificent, so then by the very definition, something that is the opposite of that, they are certainly going to steer clear of and stay away from. We find this similarly in the Torah told us a few weeks ago by the parsha of Noach. Noach is a very confusing character. On one hand, the Torah says he's a tzaddik. He's tzaddik in his generation. He's the righteous man in his generation. On the other hand, we see throughout the parsha that there are things that Noach does that are difficult to understand. Hashem tells him, go into the teva, go into the ark, I'm bringing the flood. Derech doesn't go in. And Rashi points out over there, Mikatne Emunahim, he was a man of small faith. He's a man of small faith. He's the only righteous man in the generation. He found favor in the eyes of God. He's worthwhile saving from the entire world. But he's Mikatne Emunah, he's a person of small emunah. He gets out of the ark after 1 year of taking care of the animals, having to rebuild the nation, having to rebuild civilization. And the first thing he does is he plants a vineyard, he gets drunk, and he has a debacle with his children, which is an embarrassment to Noach. The Torah doesn't know, what do you do with Noach? So the sages themselves say, he was a righteous man in his generation. What if he would have been in another generation? Would he have been as righteous as he was in his times? So the sages argue about this. And some say, well, look, if Noach was in such a lowly generation, everybody was Rishoyim, everybody was wicked, they were all doing heinous crimes, terrible things, and still Noach was able to be such a high level of a tzaddik. Imagine had he been in the generation of more tzaddikim, they would have had such a great impact on him, he would have become even a greater tzaddik. And the other set says, that's not true. In his generation, where everybody was lowly, Noach was able to lift himself up and become a righteous man. But had you placed Noach in a generation, let's say, of Avram Avinu, who was the quintessential tzaddik, the righteous man of the generation, Noach would not have achieved much in the world of righteousness. And of course, all of the Balei Musar, the Mefarshim, they're bothered by these words of the sages. If he's righteous, he's righteous. If in the lowliest generation, he's the righteousest of men. Certainly when he goes into another generation where there's more tzaddikim, he'll be even more righteous. How could you say that it'll be lower? So the Alter of Nevardik and others explain what was the motivating force in which Noach decided that he wants to be a tzaddik in his generation. Was it because he loved righteousness? And he said that Hashem put me in this world to be a tzaddik, a righteous individual, and therefore I'm going to cleave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the ways of righteousness and elevate myself the best that I can? Or did Noach say, gosh, look at this world. It's so horrible around me. It looks like Los Angeles. It's so bad. Everybody's so lowly. It is beneath my dignity to lower myself to the levels of the people in this world. And therefore, I'll never become as lowly as them. I guess the only thing I can do is become a tzaddik. Says the Alter of Nevardik, his righteousness in that way to look at it is misplaced. He's only becoming righteous because he doesn't want to be a lowlife like everybody else in the generation. But if you put him in a generation of tzaddikim, he would have said, look, everybody's a tzaddik, I'll do my best. He never would have catapulted himself to great spiritual success. It seems to be that Rav Hirsch is saying that's the meaning of this pasuk, of this verse over here. You have a person that is oyev tzedek. He loves the pathways of righteousness. And therefore he despises the way of evil and the way of wickedness. Because that his whole thrust in life is to cleave and cling to the righteous ways of our forefathers. His whole desire in life, his mission, his path that he carves for himself is that he wants to be a tzaddik, a righteous individual. So therefore he's constantly elevating himself more and more and more, looking, like we find in last week's Pasha, Rivki Imenu, her test was, is she a balas chesed? Will she do chesed? So the Kleyaka writes over there, it's no coincidence that the chesed that she did that was above and beyond was that she fed the gamalim, she fed the camels. Says the Kleyaka, the word gamal is from the word gemilus chasadim. It's a word of chesed itself, because a person who loves chesed is always looking for things in the world that they can connect the midah, the trait of chesed to. So therefore, a person who loves tzedek, who loves righteousness, they're always looking for the ways in this world that they can be more righteous, do more holy things. And therefore, anything that is rash, anything that is wicked, it's not even on the table. It's completely out of their mind, out of their sight. And this, he says, is the greatness of the king that we are describing over here. If the king wants to be a ruler, that the people are going to respect, that the people are going to trust, that the people are going to look up to because they know that he has their best interest in mind. So then he must be a king that is a haf to tzedek, who loves the pathways of righteousness. And he says that you know that evil must be eliminated because it's an obstacle to the exercise and cultivation of all that is good. It's not just that I want to stay away from evil because it's a bad thing, but I recognize that any time that I get close to something that is resha, that is evil, that is wrong, that is negative, so it then hurts the way in which I will cultivate the goodness that is in my life. Like the Ramchal writes in the Mesilas Yesharim, the goal of a person, if they want to succeed in spirituality in this world, is they must clarify for themselves what is the true good in this world. And you have to run after it. And then you must clarify for yourself what is the true ra, the true bad in this world, and run away from it like a person who is running away from a fire. It's not that I just say it's bad. A person goes, the battle of the bulge, as we are all involved with. So they go to a chasana, they go to a wedding, and the prime rib, and then there's the cutting station, the carving station, there's the sushi, all these things. So I know I should stay away. I can't go to every single station that there is at the chasana. Not every single one. Sushi, maybe. The tacos, I don't know, they have all these themes now. You go, there's the Mexican sombrero at a Jewish wedding with the guacamole in the middle over there, and the guys giving you tacos. I don't know what it has to do with the Jewish wedding, but apparently something. So, okay, sushi, yeah, the tacos, no. But look at the carving station over here. There's prime rib, there's corned beef, there's this, there's that. Okay, maybe just one little sliver of everything. A person goes to these things, it's okay, I know that it's not so good for me, so I'll try to stay away. If you don't stay away, it's not the end of the world. So you won't eat breakfast the next day. So you're going to walk with your husband after the wedding, or you'll dance a little bit extra and work up a sweat on the dance floor that night and you'll burn off the calories. It's not the end of the world. But somebody who knows that resha, that evil, that negativity, that the wickedness that is the opposite of righteousness is such a terrible thing, they'll stay away from it with all of their heart, with all of their soul, with all of their might, because they know that it's only going to damage the righteousness that they want to accomplish for themselves. Says Rav Hirsch, it is your joy in the positive achievement and in the advancement of what is good and right that makes your mission as a king a gladsome calling. When your whole focus in life is the positive, there's enough negativity in the world today to destroy a human being. You just turn on the news for 5 seconds, that's it. Negative, 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 negative. You talk to certain people, everything out of their mouth, negative, negative, negative. Somebody once told me they were very disappointed in their daughter. This goes back many, many years. The daughter was a crazy lady. The lady herself was crazy as well. And she says, my daughter, she walks around with a dark cloud over her head everywhere that she goes. And it's true, she did. Everything out of her mouth was negative. Everything she did was undermining the sanctity of a human being. Everything, came out everything. Says Rav Hirsch, you want to be a good person? You want to be a person that people will be glad to see? When you walk into a room, when your name appears on caller ID, they don't do the old swipe over there because they don't want to talk to you. They want to talk to you because they know you're going to make them feel good. Then you have to be a person who's positive. You have to be upbeat. How does a person stay positive and upbeat? They connect themselves to tzidkus, to righteousness. Tzedek means when things are clear, when things are straight, when things are right. When I'm doing things because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the master of tzedek, right? At a levaya, lo aleinu, at a funeral, one of the things that the mourner has to say is something called tziduk hadin, which is a whole declaration at the burial site itself that I acknowledge that everything that Hashem does in this world is b'tziduk hadin, is correct in his judgment. Tzedek means it's correct. If a person is living a life that is correct, that is straight, that is moving in the right direction, then you will have a life that is going to be truly positive, and you'll stay away from those things that are negative, because as we said, nobody wants to be around a negative person. Certainly not your husbands, that is for sure. They don't like when you come home and you're complaining and everything. And the wives don't like when the husbands come home and they complain. This morning after davening, this is a new place, Baruch Hashem. So I have no tainas, I have no complaints against anybody. But this morning after davening, and where the guys are standing around getting their coffee and everything. Rabbi, you need to do this. Rabbi, you need to do this. Can you make the gate like that? Sure, no problem. Whatever you need, we'll take care of it. One step at a time. You can't talk in a negative way, and you can't talk in a demonstrative way, and you can't talk in an ordering way, because people don't want to be around that. The king over here, he's got all the power in the world. He's sitting on the throne of glory. He's ruling over a nation. Says Rav Hirsch, but that king who rules with a soft arm, who rules with positive midos, character traits, who rules in a way where there's joy and there's positivity in what he does. I was once in a dentist office. Usually dentist office is not like the most happy place in the world. A lot of pulling teeth and people are in pain and everything. So normally you go to the dentist office, it's like a very somber place. It's very serious. It's very intense. Nobody looks forward. I took my kids to the dentist, and everybody there, they're smiling. They're happy. The doctor's bouncing around. The secretaries are all big smiles on their face. I was wondering what they were on over there. A little too much of that stuff that they give when you have to go under. No, there's just a positive vibe. And you want to get your teeth pulled out in such a place because it's a good place to be. They make you feel so good. And that's what he's saying. The king has to rule with judgment. He has to rule sometimes very strict. There has to be decrees that he's going to bring down to the nation. There's no choice. But if you know that he's a good king, you know that he wants what's best for you, you know that he's interested in what's your best interest, so then you can see him gladly, and then, as it says over here, he will be anointed, he will be crowned, will be anointed with the beautiful oils of anointment that are going to consecrate him. So he says like this, he says, the use of power to merely to suppress evil, however laudable such endeavors might be, is always a solemn duty rather than a positive accomplishment. It's like we said, did you become the tzaddik because you feel that you have no choice? Or did you become the tzaddik because you want to be a tzaddik? Do you run away from evil because you think it's horrible, it's frightening, and therefore you have to squelch it and get rid of it? Or do you do it because you know that if you engage in that act, it's going to take away from the real levels, the real places that you want to reach in life? And therefore the blissful character of your position as king that distinguishes you from so many other rulers is that your focus, your goal is on tzidkus, on being righteous, and memela, automatically you are avoiding the evil that is there in the world because you want nothing at all to do with it. Anything that will take away, you're not going to do. If a person was in law school, they're studying to be a doctor, and they know that they have one of their final exams coming the next day, no TikTok video in the world is going to get in the way of studying that night. No amazing event that's going on with your friends and they're trying to call you to come, nothing's going to get in the way because I have a mission that I have to accomplish. I have to be prepared for that test. If my goal in life is to be righteous, then nothing is going to get in my way of that. And therefore we said, it's not only the king, it's really any person who's in the world of relationships, any person who has other people that are depending on them, any person, just a husband and a wife, a parent and a child. We all have to be people that are perceived, because that's reality, that we are the positive, we're not the negative. We're the good, we're not the bad. We're people that are striving to elevate ourselves and not to bring ourselves down. Says the Malbim on this pasuk over here, this, that you run the kingdom with Yosha, with straightness, with tzedek and righteousness, Shaviyos kinyan benafshecha. You acquire this inside of your nefesh, inside of your soul. When you live a life that is guided by these principles, in the beginning, perhaps it's something that's external from you. It's something that you think is beyond your grasp. But when you begin to live that way, and it continues to go on like that, and you talk about these things, and you make decisions like this, and you work to become a person that is yosher, that is straight, but sidkus with righteousness, so then you acquire this inside of yourself. It becomes real. It's who you are. That's the way you start looking at the world. It's how you deal in certain situations. You'll think back to yourself 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when you came up against certain challenges in your life, the way that you thought about them then. And now after 20 years, 25 years, maybe it's 30 years of developing your hashkafa, the way that you look at the world, the way you identify with Judaism, you make decisions differently now than you did so many years before. Why? Even though the information hasn't changed, you knew what was going on back then. Why do you do things differently now? Because you acquired it as part of who you are. Your brain functions differently. Your heart feels things differently. Your eyes see things differently. Like the Chazal tell us, Chacham Einov Beroisha, a wise person, his eyes are in his head. The Chacham, the wise person, is Rayas Hanor, they always see what's coming in the future. Before I do this, I stop and I think to myself, what's the result going to be? Now, sometimes you have to have lightning speed in your mind to realize, if I do this, this is what's going to happen. You have to hold yourself back. Or there's a mitzvah that you want to do, but it's hard to get yourself to do it. But if I do it, imagine where it's going to bring me. Imagine how it's going to change me. Imagine the direction I'm going to be able to go through in my life. So therefore says the Malbim over here, the more good that you do, the more that you try to strive for Yoshev, etc., to be straight and to be righteous, the more you are kind of, the more you bring it inside of your nefesh, and it becomes the person that you are. And that's why we can transform, and that's why we can change, and that's why, you see all these kids, they go to Eretz Yisrael, and the word that we use today is they flip out. You have children that are coming from more modern backgrounds. They go to the land of Israel. They go to yeshiva over there. They walked in there. They were cool guys in LA doing everything under the sun, the Instagram, the Telegram, the Facebook, this running around, all the different things. They come back after you can't even recognize them. Guy comes back. He's dressed nicely. I walked away in rags. Comes back. He's actually wearing a shirt. He's wearing pants. How nice. He's wearing socks with his shoes. What a chiddush. He comes into the shul. He walks in, picks himself a place in the shul, starts davening. You remember this guy was all these guys walking around in the back over there, couldn't sit still. Now he's davening. After davening, he pulls out a sefer and he starts learning. What happened to this guy in a year? What did he go through? The answer is that when you get into a world of Yosher and Tzedek, where life is straight and Tzedek and righteous, you begin to acquire these things in your nefesh, in your soul. You transform, you become a different person. You don't have to go to Eretz Yisrael to transform. It helps a lot, especially for the kids. But I don't know anyone, if you're going to yeshiva or seminary for the next year, probably not. Which means that in our own environment, in our own lives, in our own pathway that we are carving out for ourselves, we have to begin to try to acquire such levels. And he says, Sha'afta tzedek, when you get to that point where you keep acquiring these levels, you love righteousness, v'tisne resha, and you will despise the wickedness and evil of this world. Shelechein, therefore, when you get to that point where it's so clear to you of what is right and what is wrong, says the Malbim, it will be impossible for you to tilt yourself off the path of righteousness. If you know what they have in the cars right now, where you have that ability that if you start veering over into the other lane. I don't know how the car knows, but it knows. If you start veering over into the other lane, so the car begins alerting you. Sometimes the wheel shakes, sometimes it's just a beep, beep. So you're veering into the other lane. They have this other thing in some of the cars where it's keeping track of how many times you weren't careful. It's telling you if you're paying attention or not. Yeah, there's like a coffee cup. So if the coffee cup is full, that means you must be racing with caffeine inside of you and you're wide awake. And the thing is, tells you that you're full. Then if you're not, then the cup gets getting less and less and less. And it tells you you're not paying attention to the drive. Says the Malbim, a person that is sensitive to spirituality, a person who is sensitive to what is yosha, what is straight, and what is tzedek and what is righteousness, the moment they begin to veer off the lane that they're supposed to be in, automatically, beep, 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 they'll hear it. Automatically, the steering wheel begins to shake, they'll feel it. Oh, okay, pull myself back onto the path, automatically. And he says that's the advantage, that a person who works on it and they acquire it inside their nefesh, it becomes second nature to them, and then they cannot be tita minat tzedek v'ayosher, they cannot turn and veer off the path because right away they feel it and they don't like the feeling that they have. Al kain, and therefore Mishichecha Elokim Elokecha, Hashem is going to anoint you with these oils. People will love you. They will anoint you with the oils. Oil is always indicative of the kingdom, of the greatness of the king. The Shem and Sasa, glad oil. People will be pleased with your success. And I just want to read the next verse because the next verse brings it out even more. But the first thing is over here. If you do what is right and you're living a life that is exemplary and you are an example to the people that are around you, they will be the ones that will be so happy in your presence. They are the ones that will come and help to anoint you to make you this great person because they are pleased with your spiritual success. But listen to the next verse. And number 9, it says, more it says different types of fragrances, of herbs, incense. Kol bigdaisecha really means all of your garments. Beged means all of your garments. Min heichle shein minish simchucha, which is whatever the palaces will be gladdened by you. But the Malbim says beged is also a lesson of a language of boged. Boged means the people that rebel against you. Says the Malbim, if you are such a person who acquires for themselves, deep inside their soul, I'm yosher and I'm tzedek, I'm straight and I'm righteous. And therefore, that's my whole mission in life. That's all my passion, all my drive. I'm always trying to do the right things. I'm steering clear of the negative. I'm the positive person. You come into my presence, I'll make you feel so good. And you'll hear I talk about life and you'll see how I look at life and what I think about and what I do. So then he writes, even your enemies, the people that rebel against you, the people that aggravated you and couldn't stand you, they didn't want your kingdom. Over here he's talking about the king. They will throw all of these wonderful perfumes and fragrances on you because they cannot deny what an amazing person you are. Even though that they rebelled, even though that they undermined you, even though that they tried to make your life miserable at certain points, at the end of the day, they see how you just keep going straight. They see how nothing phases you. They see your positivity under all conditions. They see that you're a person of truth, a person of righteousness, a person of justness and fairness and being straight, and you have mercy on others. The greatest baggage, the greatest enemy and rebeller against you, even they, at the end of the day, they have to admit that you're right. And they have to admit that you're going in the proper path. And they're not going to fight you anymore. They're actually going to pile on Says the Malbim, they'll pile on the sweet smelling fragrances of all of these things. Reb Revda said that there was a period in his life where he was trapped in England for many, many years. It's really the way that Rabbi Graydon became Rabbi Graydon, because Rabbi Revda was stuck in England because of illness and sickness, and he parked himself there for like 10 or 15 years. He couldn't leave. The doctor that was able to cure, that was the shaliach, was the messenger to help him through his sickness, was there in England, and he was sent there by his Rebbe. He had to be there. While he was there, he was makar of loads and loads of people. One of them was Rabbi Graydon. And amongst Rabbi Graydon, all of his other friends who are big, what we call Marbitzei Torah, people that are Rosh Yeshivas and Rabbanim and Mashkichim and big people in Klal Yisrael today. So Reb Revda was a very outspoken person, and he was not bashful about saying the emes, about saying the truth. And often in public, he would say things that people couldn't handle because he was just fire. The fire, he was Yoshev at Tzedek, he was straight, and he was just, and he was righteous. And if something was Resha, was wickedness, he couldn't tolerate it. He would just say how it is. So he said that he had many enemies in England over the years because people just could not handle his rhetoric. They couldn't handle the honesty. They couldn't handle the fiery truth that he was bringing to them. And he said, by the way, every person who's in a position of rabbanis or anything in the community. He said, if you don't have enemies, you're doing something wrong. So I always tell my wife, whenever another enemy comes, I say, you see, we must be doing something right. So he said he had his biggest opponent in all of England was a man who would say things negative about him in public, who would sometimes argue with him. It was a person that really gave him a lot of difficulties. One day the man calls Reb Revda and he says, do you have time for a meeting? So Reb Revda said, okay. He had no idea what's coming. So they meet and they sit down to talk, and the man says to him, he says, Rebbe, he says, Reb Revda, he says, see, we're still getting used to the new everything. He says, Reb Revda, he said, you know how much of an opponent I've been to you since you're here in England. You know how I fought you, and you know how I don't agree with everything you say. But at the end of the day, I know that you are the only man of truth in town. And I'm going through a very difficult period in my life, and I need the proper advice. You're the only one that I can ask, because I know you're going to tell me the truth of what I should do. Says the Malbim over here, even though you have opponents, even though you have enemies, even though people can't stand your guts, but if they see that you are honest, and they see that you are just, and they see that you are moving along in the right path, and you don't waver, you can't tilt off. You can't tilt off. Like we said, when the buzzers are going to start ringing, and you just keep going straight. As much as they say they can't stand you, at the end of the day, they'll respect you. And that's what we're saying over here. And that's why he says they'll end up throwing on all this fine-smelling perfume and fragrance because they admire you for that which you are doing in your life. Says the Tiva Tehillim, Rav Gamliel Rabinovich, the following idea, beautiful idea. He says that many people, they learn about tzaddikim, going on this verse, tzedek. Many people, they learn about tzaddikim, about the righteous men and women of this generation, previous generations. We read books about them. That's why some people say that you should be very careful how many art scroll books you read about Gedolei Yisrael, about the great leaders, because you'll have what's called Chalishas Hadas. You'll say, I'll never be a Rebbe Kanievsky. I'll never be a Rav Scheinberg. I'll never be the Brisker. I'll never be. So what's the point? And so a person says, you know what? Tzidkos, that's for them. Righteousness, that's for them. Little old me, what am I going to accomplish? Just be happy, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they're not running around pillaging the town and causing tsuris for every single person I go down. I kept Shabbos this week. I ate kosher food. I said a bracha this morning on my deluxe coffee from the new Makar Chaim coffee machine. You should be happy, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I won't be a tzaddik. What's the big deal? So he says, when people speak about the praises of the tzaddikim, so that how they serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, people don't learn any lessons from their ways. Because Umatar says, ask what they say to themselves, it's nothing to do with me. Look, Reb Kanievsky, you know what her yichus is? You have to think about this for a moment. And then you'll see you have no shaykhis, you have no connection. Reb Kanievsky, her father was Reb Eliashiv. Okay? Her grandfather was Reb Ari Levine. Okay. So Ari Levine was known as the tzaddik of Yerushalayim, or the tzaddik of our time, he was the tzaddik of the generation. Her father was Reb Eliashiv. He was the greatest sage of the, make sure we give a note to the rabbi that we have to get automatic closes on the doors over here. So anybody who comes in just closes. Now, so he says like this. So she's coming from two generations of the most illustrious families in all of Klal Yisrael. She then went to marry Rav Chaim Kanievsky. Rav Chaim Kanievsky's father was the stipler. His uncle was the Chazon Ish, and there were great people on all sides over there. So she goes on to become the legendary Rebbetzin of Klal Yisrael. And then you read her biography. Wow, she's unbelievable. Look how she loved every Jew. You know who her grandfather was? Her grandfather's the man who went to prison on Rosh Hashanah to where there were mitzorim, where there were people that had leprosy that nobody else wanted to come in within their contact. And he ended up going, and he would blow the shofar for them, and everybody said, "You can't go, you're going to get leprosy." He said, "I'm not going to get leprosy. There's a yid in prison who didn't hear the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. I'm going in there myself." So what do you call it? So you read her biography, and you say to yourself, "How will I ever be a Rebbetzin Kanievsky?" Impossibility. It's mamish impossible. And the answer is, if you think like that, then it will be impossible. And if you think like that, you say, it's not for me. I'm not cut from that cloth. I didn't come from that family. I don't have any connection to it. Says Rav Gamliel Rabinovich, it's not true. Ach ein ze emes. This is not the truth. Ela kol adam yochai liskus l'madregus ba'avodas Hashem. Every single person is able to achieve great levels in their personal service of Hashem. Ukemoshe kasu b'sarm, like it's written in the holy works. The adam tzarich rak, all a person needs, shelo ratzain v'ishtokakois lekach, they just need to have a desire, a ratzon, a will, to be able to achieve these very high levels in avodas Hashem, in the service of God. Doesn't matter that if your last name is not Kanievsky. Doesn't matter if your last name is not Brundi. Doesn't matter if your last name is not Kamenetsky. Your name can be anything. As long as you have a burning desire. Look at Rivki Minu. Just having this week's Parsha. Her father was from the biggest Rishayim in all the world. Her brother, Lavan, they don't make Rishayim like that in the world. They broke the mold when they made Lavan. And Rivki Minu, she grew up in a place of Rishayim. She grew up in a town filled with wicked people. She was immersed in such a town. And Rashi says, nevertheless, she went on to become a tzaddikis. So that's we learned from our imams, from our matriarchs. They didn't come from great stock. Sorry, Menu. Where did she come from? She didn't come from a great family, illustrious lineage. She came from a family of idol worshippers. As Rabbi Bernstein told me the other day, that if in the world of shidduchim today it became so complicated, now the new question is he vaccinated or not vaccinated? That's the new question in shidduchim. Now you don't know what they want to know. Are they a pro-vax family? Some are the anti-vax family. So every time they ask me this question now, I don't know where they're going with this. So I'm trying to think, okay, they're from this city, and the way they said it with the edge and the tone in their voice, probably. So I don't know. What do they want to hear? So these are the questions. Okay, with all the silly questions. Once a mother calls me. My kids were in the car, and I think it was a mother called me. She's looking into a shidduch for her daughter, And she's asking me a load of questions, have nothing at all to do with a good marriage, nothing at all. And then she starts asking about the family. She says, does the father wear a hat? So my kids are in the car, so I was having fun with this lady. I said, yes, as a matter of fact, we live in Tarzana. It's very hot in Tarzana. The walk to shul is about 25 minutes, sometimes 115 degrees. I'm pretty sure that every time that it's that hot, he always wears a baseball cap to shul. That was a joke. Yeah, but that's the hat that he wears. And so the woman started laughing. No, I'm being serious. Does he wear a hat? I said, I don't know if he wears a hat or doesn't wear a hat, but chesed, I can tell you, is a pillar of this family. Okay, but does he wear a hat? Yeah. Now, so the point, so that's the thing. So Rabbi Bernstein told me the following idea. So everybody's asking so many questions. They have a whole list of things. He said, if Avram Avinu would ever be suggested as a shidduch to the daughters of Klal Yisrael today, there's no way at all that we would ever say yes. His father's Avodah Zarah, the guy's about tshuva, his wife's about his tshuva. They didn't have, he has a son whose name is Yishmael. The kid is off the derech completely. This one, who's going to take that family? And yet we see from our great forefathers and matriarchs, that's what is their greatness, that they had a desire deep inside of them to accomplish and to achieve. It didn't matter where they came from. It didn't matter who their mother was. It didn't matter what their neighbor was like. It didn't care to them. They were focused on the Derech HaYosher, on the straight path, the Derech HaTzedek, the Derech of righteousness. And because of that, they became the great people. Says Rav Gamliel, you can be the same. As long as you have a desire to, don't make excuses for yourself. And he says, maybe that's what it means in this verse. Ahavta tzedek, if you love righteousness, v'tisne resha, you hate, you despise wickedness. Al yidei shoyves hatzedek, because that you love righteousness. V'yisne sarah, and you despise the evil. V'kach yizke lemadregos ba'avodas Hashem. That's how you will be able to lift yourself up in the levels of service of Hashem. Like it says, Hashem will douse you. He'll anoint you with his oil. It says, Rashi, whenever there's greatness, we always find that it talks about being anointed with oil. It says Rav Gamliel, perhaps it's hinting to us the following idea about service of Hashem. The way in which you're going to be zeicher to gedula, to greatness in serving God. You'll love righteousness. You'll despise that bad that is there. So what that your last name is not Scheinberg, your last name is not Soloveitchik, your last name is not all the other gifter. Doesn't matter. Your last name is not the Ben Ish Chai. It doesn't matter. As long as you know who you are and you know that inside of you have the potential for greatness and you try to make it actualized, says Dovid HaMelech of Tehillim, you'll get there. You might not become Rebbe Zakanievsky. You might not become a Rebbe they're going to write an art school book about after 120 years. Okay, so there won't be a book about you. What's the big deal? But in Shemayim, they're writing a book about you. In the heavens, they're making videos about you to show the righteousness that you desired in your life and how you kept going forward and doing what you're supposed to do. Let's try to get over here to the end of this Tehillim. And there's one pasuk over here. I cannot skip this because this is a Tehillim shir for women, and this is one of the most famous psukim that women hear all of their life. Pasuk Yud Daled, which is number 14. And it says the following: Kol kvuda bas melech, all of the honor of a bas melech, of a princess. Penima is within. The glory of a princess, a Jewish princess, is penima, is within. Mimishbet Saizav Levusha, it's greater than all of the golden borders that are on her raiment, that are on her queenly and sovereign garments that she wears. Where is the real glory of the Jewish woman? Where is her greatness really seen? You might think, well, she has such fancy clothes. She looks so beautiful. She has all of these things. That's not her greatness. The greatness is really on the inside. Says Rav Hirsch, and he says that although that a princess may appear to be glorious and splendid in public, of course she is. She wears the garments of a princess. There's nothing finer in all of the palace. She's adorned with gold and with silver, and she has crowns on her head, and her clothes is like a tapestry of beauty. And that's what you might think. However, her true glory is revealed only in quiet, in the private chambers of her life, in the secret recesses of her heart, in the actions that she does when nobody else sees who she is, and the way that she treats her husband, and the way that she takes care of her children, in the way that she davens when nobody else is in the house, just her and her sitter, her and her Tehillim. The famous story of the Horowitz that we told over 1,000 times in this year. The Horowitz was once given the Tehillim of his mother, and the pages were stained in tears. And the Horowitz began crying, and he says, can you imagine how many tears my mother cried for me? If it wouldn't be for my mother's tears, where would I be today? Everybody has to see you saying Tehillim. You're not like the men. The men have to come to shul. They need a minyan. They have to take their talis like it's a cape and make big brachas over here so everybody should hear them and see them. They come running in. They bang into the table so everybody should hear. You're quiet. You're in the house. You're by yourself. Nobody else around. Just you and your art school sitter. Interlinear probably will work best so you can see the word for word, what it is that you are saying. You pull out your Tehillim because you know that there's somebody that is sick and you want to say Tehillim, they should get better. You know somebody who's in a tzar, who's in a difficult situation. You know they need some salvation from Hashem. Maybe it's you, maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's children, maybe it's your neighbor, maybe it's somebody else. And you say, you light the candles Friday night. Now, many of you don't have little children in the house anymore. Husbands are at shul. Just you by the candles. Do you know what that time of tefillah is by the candles Friday night? You could pour out your heart and your tears, and it's between you and the Rabbi Shalom. No fanfare, no showing off, nobody knows about it. Even your husband doesn't know what you were crying about when you lit the candles that night. Says the pasuk, Kol kvuda bas melech penima, the real glory of the queen, of the princess of Klal Yisrael, is what you do privately. You don't have to be out there. Not everybody has to see you. Not everybody has to know. The less that you are drawing attention to yourself, the more glorious you truly are. Like the Gemara tells us that bracha comes to those things that are hidden from the eye. You have plenty of time to be hidden from the public eye. Sometimes you have no choice. You have to be out in public here. You have to go to the wedding. You have to go to the banquet. You have to give a shir. Fine, all of that. That's what you're meant to do at those times. But in the private times, you should know that your real glory, your real greatness, that's where it is. And he says that these qualities are much greater than the exquisite beauty of the gold borders which shine at the hems of her garments. A princess has gold on the bottom of her clothes and they're sparkling in the sun. Everybody sees it. They cannot not look at the princess. But your private matters with Hashem are much greater. Pinima means within. It always means the inner recess as opposed to the outer chambers. And that is, in fact, says Rav Hirsch, that is the true greatness of a woman. And we'll conclude over here with Pasuk Yud Zayin 17. It says, now remember, according to many of the commentaries over here, this is really a bracha that the king and the queen are receiving on the day of their chasana. And it's really a bracha that we should give to any chassan, to any bride and groom, that they should understand what's going on. Tachas avaisecha, says the verse, in place of your avaisecha, your fathers, yubanecha, your children should come to take the place of Aveisecha, of your fathers. Teshisemai lesarim b'chol haaretz, and they will be like princes across the land. Says Rav Hirsch the following words, and he says like this: he wants that this couple should merit true marital happiness and harmony. It's not just having children, a nice picture you can put on the wall that you went to JCPenney, if there's such a place anymore. You take the picture, the arms around each other, they're smiling, he's, with the big cheeks like this. No, it's much more than that. But you want to be blessed with children in whose personalities the parental heritage will live on. We want to be able to see ourselves in our children. Of course, they have to be their own people. But we would like to know that all of the work, all of the effort that we did all those years raising them, we were able to transfer that down into them. Our midos, what's important, what is right, what is wrong, the gentility, perhaps, the emes, the truth, the ruchnius, the kedusha, the holiness that is there. We want to see that living down through our children. And then, says the pasuk, you'll have joy of what? Seeing your own parents live again in your children. But he's saying even more over here. And may your sons grow up to be so capable that they will not only be able to assist you in your endeavors for the welfare of your people, but they'll be able to employ them as princes throughout the land. Meaning, we should be a reflection of the character and the good things that we acquired from our parents. And then we make it into our own. It becomes who we are. Because everybody's an individual, so we take the goodness and we try to inculcate that into ourselves. And then we try to pass that down to our children. So within our children, you're able to see the glory of even the previous generations. Now again, let's not get sidetracked by all the great people of our generation, the yichus, the lineage they have. But if you'll know that Rav Chaim Kanievsky and Rav Arnleif Steinman made a shidduch. Okay, these were the two Gedolei Ador, Rav Chaim's daughter, I believe, and the son of Rav Arnleif Steinman. They got married to each other. Okay, so you have Rav Chaim and Rav Arnleif, two great people. The wives, two great people. The children, great people. Then they started having children. And then there's grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The family lineage is so strong that when you meet these children, and I've met some of these children before, you see where they're coming from. You see their purity, you see their kindness, you see their love of Klal Yisrael, you see where they're coming from, where they stem from. Says Rav Hirsch, that's the greatest bracha. When we bring children into this world, that we can see are going, tracing themselves back to the roots of where they come from. And they're living a life that is exemplary here in this world, and they're a shining example of the work and the effort that we put into them. That's a simcha, that's a nachas that cannot be replicated anywhere. And I'll just end with these words of Rav Gamliel Rabinovich, and he says, Tachas aveisecha benecha, in place of your father should be your children. Al yidei shehabanim yelchu b'darchei avos. When the children go in the ways of their fathers, v'lo yazuzu midarcham, and they don't veer from the path, ta'amay lahem zechus avoisam, the merits of the fathers and the forefathers will stand on their behalf. We have a major concept in Judaism, and it's called schus avos. It's the merits of the fathers and the forefathers. How will a person merit to have those merits in their life? How will you know that the merits of your father or your forefathers or the ones from previous generations who were living a life of Torah mitzvah, how will you be zoich, how will you merit to have that? It says very simply, if you go in the pathways and you follow what they did and you don't veer from the path, so then they're up there in Shemaim and they're rooting on for you. That let my grandchild, let my great-grandchild, let the generations, let them continue to be able to go in the pathways of Hashem. Let them be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with ratzon, with will, with desire. Let them overcome the obstacles and the challenges of life so they can continue to be close to you, Hashem. if you follow in the way of the forefathers, you follow in the way of our illustrious families, remember, even if you don't have a fancy last name, somewhere back there, whether it's 2 generations, 3 generations, all of you come from illustrious stock. And if you can't find anybody there, just go back to Avram Avinu. Everybody is B'nai Avram. You want to go back even a little bit closer? Go back to Yaakov. We're B'nai Yisrael. That means we all come from the Shvatim. We are one of the children from the lineage of Yaakov Avinu. We all have greatness inside of us. We all have a yichus. We all go back to Har Sinai, where the Torah was given to the Jewish people. So there's always schus of us. There's always the fatherly and the parental merits in our life. How do we deserve it? We have to follow in those pathways. The more that we follow in those pathways, the more Hashem is going to give us that. And that way, Be'ez Hashem, as we're saying all of these things, you become the person. People are happy to see you. People are happy for your success. They're happy, sometimes you go to somebody's chasana, there's just jealousy over there. You're jealous of such a person. You're happy for what they accomplished and what they achieved. Why? Because you know they're honest, you know they're sincere, you know that they're good, you know that they're trying so hard. Happy for you. I'll throw the oil on you. I'll throw the perfume on you. I'll dance in front of you like you can't imagine. And in that zechus, and Yetz Hashem will continue to become the people that are Yoshev, it said that we are straight and we are people of righteousness. We'll find the ratzon, the desire inside of ourselves to become the best tzaddikim on our level that we can be. Have a wonderful week, everyone.